Thank you for joining us for The Drive Back, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which of course is to talk about it on the ride home. I'm Garrett, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
And today, we've got a little bit of a twist, but it is a first-timers. What is a first-timers, Adrian?
First timers is where both Garrett and I have not seen the movie, so we go ahead and we watch it.
That is right. And we have a little bit of a twist. This is a little bit of a hybrid between a first-timers and a phone a friend. We have our friend of the show, Mark, who requested that we watch Body Heat. So all of this and more coming up on The Drive Back. Alrighty, and we're back with the first timers slash phone a friend for Body Heat. This was an interesting pick from a friend of ours named Mark. He had he had actually talked about a couple of movies when I was working with him, and this was one of the ones that I threw on here as a first timers, and we kind of discussed to make it a hybrid. Maybe we'll do more of these in the future. I don't know.
See why not?
It gives us more ideas for movies that we can't think of. So, but let's go ahead and go over the basics of the movie we're talking about today, and then we'll dive right in. So, released in 1981, Body Heat was directed by Lawrence Kasdan and stars William Hurt, Kathleen Turner, and Richard Crenna. In the midst of a searing Florida heat wave, a woman persuades her lover, a small-town lawyer, to murder her rich husband. So, this is kind of like the 80s version of a film noir movie, I would say.
Absolutely.
Totally, like
an accepted term. For
I
the
think
movie.
exactly. I mean, well, usually when you think film noir, like I think of the classic 40s and 50s, like black and white, detective type movies. Also, this fits into the category with the femme fatale. Obviously, the leading woman who's quite deadly or has some sort of secret or something. But this is both of our first times watching it. Adrian, spoiler free. What did you think about Body Heat? Because you didn't know anything about this movie, I'm guessing.
No, no, I would say no. I feel like I may have heard it like here or there, but no context for it. Yeah, I think it's really, really good. I think the plot is really strong. I think if you were to write a movie with this much double crossing and triple crossing, it would be considered a great spy thriller movie kind of thing. I think it was really, really good.
Gotcha. I'm a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. I felt that this movie was a little boring. And I didn't think honestly, I didn't think it was that interesting probably until the last 20 minutes. But I feel like for me, it was a little too late. But we'll talk about that as we dive into some of the spoilers from the movie. Because the movie does have some, again, anything that has double crossings, triple crossings, twists, and things like that, they're spoilers. So we don't want to talk about those. But let's go ahead. We'll drop a spoiler warning. If you do want to watch Body Heat, you can only rent it right now. I rented it through Amazon Prime, which is pretty cheap. Most movies are like $2, $3, $4 maybe. I think this one was like $3. So, but let's go ahead and dive into the spoiler stuff. So obviously, sounds like you like this movie a lot more than I did. So for you, in your opinion, what were the good things about it? Let's go ahead and just dive in.
Just the plot, really. I think that's the only thing this movie had going for it. I think the acting was okay. I think everything else was kind of just subpar. I think this movie is obviously very sexual, with the heat wave going on and a lot of sweating and a lot of definitely something that could be on like Cinemax at 2 a.m.
Yeah,
But I don't think that does anything for the movie. I get that it was filmed in a time where that was very probably new and exciting or scandalous even, but in today's world, I think it just takes away from the film, to be honest. I just don't feel like any of it was really needed, and I wish I got more story during those times, so that was a big negative for me. But the only positive really is the story. I just found it really engaging, and I liked all the twists and the plot turns and identity theft and all that stuff. I thought it was really interesting.
the like for me, the story was there. I mean, it wasn't offensive. It just like offensively bad or like just like incredibly good for me either. It was just kind of bland.
I think in that comes that we get detective shows that cover the whole same plot in an hour nowadays.
Yeah, but this isn't like a detective. It's more like, two good people do something very bad, and then you actually find out that one of those good people is not that good a person.
But I think it just comes from being oversaturated with shows like You, where that concept is done at a much higher level with over entire seasons.
yeah.
And I think it either didn't have enough room to breathe or it had too much room to breathe in this particular film, where I think it kind of I can see how it just floats there and doesn't really do anything.
Now, I want to ask a question. Did you feel that there was chemistry? Did you feel like the two leads were actually attracted to each other in the beginning?
No, not at all. The plot is it. The acting I did not feel at all.
Right?
There was zero connection. It felt so 80s in the sense of like, oh, here's an 80s movie star, and here's an 80s movie star. Let's make him canoodle.
Well, it's well, it's actually funny. I have the trivia pulled up for this movie because there's a really interesting piece of trivia about this movie. But Kathleen Turner, who plays the main woman, I can't remember her name right now, even though I have Maddie. Yeah, this was her first movie, so she wasn't a star at this point.
Was it her last movie?
No, she's had a career. But speaking of the canoodling, there is an interesting. There's a lot of canoodling in this movie, and I feel like there's at one point you actually do get to see some pretty spot-on footage of the lower regions. So just be aware. This movie has a lot of that going around. But apparently both William Hurt, who sadly passed away, I think a month or two ago.
Wow, I didn't know that.
William Hurt was also the defense secretary in the MCU. Thunderbolt Ross.
That was the same guy?
It's the same actor, yeah.
That's crazy to me.
So you saw Thunderbolt Ross as Thunderbolt. If
yeah.
You know
let's decide who the real God of Thunder is.
But apparently both he and Kathleen Turner, who played Maddie, wanted the crew to feel comfortable filming their love scene, so they lined up the crew and both actors introduced themselves to each crew member. While they did that, they were totally naked.
Just to get over the
stigma or whatever.
Yeah, the awkwardness.
Makes sense.
I mean, I get that, but I also feel like that innately is pretty awkward.
Hey, William Hurt.
My hands up here. Stop shaking that.
Don't grab my third arm. But there's really no chemistry between the two of them. I mean, even later on
in the whole movie, I don't get it. I don't get any relationships. I didn't grasp any vibe from that at all.
It just kind of feels like they wanted to have two people who were maybe attractive for the time together, and it's obviously William Hurt's character is more of a womanizer. He's like a serial flirter and
Sure.
hookup artist, I guess you could say. But then maybe he just falls for this one. It just didn't feel believable in terms of the character.
Well, and he also, I guess, mistakes her for the other girl in the beginning because they look so alike, and then that's just a weird start to the relationship. Like,
yeah,
just super weird all the way around.
And then, not to mention the husband's niece walking out and just yeah, that was awkward. And then they just totally blow it over until it comes up later in the movie.
And one thing that I really liked kind of about the plot is that I just enjoyed that whole aspect of the will being written to be nullified from the beginning. That kind of whole reveal thing. And I always like in books and movies when everything kind of comes together or there was a secret plan all along. And I really thought that was a really fun moment.
That was interesting because when they're in the lawyer's office and they reveal that Maddie was the one that rewrote that part because she knew that it would get her everything. And like from that point on, I mean, you start to suspect that she's got something else that she's trying to do. But did you see the twist at the end coming? that she wasn't actually the person she said she was.
Yes, that was the whole thing with how they looked alike, and then the yearbook and
Yeah.
stolen identity and all that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of did. I guess I didn't realize exactly how it would happen, but I definitely started to predict that she was impersonating. Like, it just didn't add up.
Which was funny because maybe it was because I found myself so uninterested with the movie that I kind of just glossed over it, and then that yearbook part happens, and I was like, oh, wait, what? And then the movie just ends.
Which I think actually added a lot to the movie, where you kind of reflect on it in all these different ways when they reveal that. Of like, you kind of think about all the details of everything that was said, and the whole story and everything. So very, very interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of, at least for me, it was out of nowhere. Usually I'm pretty good at kind of deducing when those things are going to happen. Yeah. So there is one piece of trivia I wanted to bring up, because this movie, as we said earlier, it takes place during a heat wave in Florida that looks so incredibly oppressive. Like, that's probably what our planet's going to look like in a couple of years here. But what was really interesting, and it's really effective at showing the heat. I would say you're showing people sweating all the time.
Yeah,
like
very
everything,
steamy set.
everything feels moist. Like, even things that shouldn't feel moist. However, the movie was shot during freezing cold temperatures. The production had to simulate the heat wave of the film's story, the actors having to act hot in cold conditions. For example, the actors had to suck ice cubes before speaking to eliminate foggy breath, and had water sprayed on their skin and shirts to simulate body sweat.
That is really interesting, because I mean, I definitely would not have gotten that. I almost don't believe that because of how well they were able to mask it.
Which is interesting because someone in the cast, I guess, disputed this, remembering shooting in blazing heat, but only one person out of the entire cast said that. So
wow, now we'll never know.
I know. Now we'll never know. Also, apparently, it's really funny. So Ted Danson is in this movie. For those of you who don't know, Ted Danson played Sam on Cheers. That was probably his most famous role. He played the lawyer friend.
I've never seen Cheers.
Oh no, it's the lawyer friend of William Hurt.
Oh yeah, I know who he was in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So apparently, his mom went to go see the movie and walked out due to the picture's provocative sexuality. According to the documentary on the film's DVD, she never told him this and pretended for many years that she had seen the entire movie, which she hadn't until it was revealed to him many years later that she walked out. Way to lie to your kid.
Seriously, yikes.
But to be fair, at least it wasn't like his scenes that caused her to walk out.
Yeah, that's fair. And
You
or
know.
she didn't have to see him doing any of that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. It could have been like, yeah, I wanted to watch the whole movie, but I couldn't get over your massive thunderbolt. Like,
Oh my god.
that's an awkward conversation to have. But I'm struggling to think of anything else to really say about this movie. It just, for me, like, even the plot was uninteresting. I guess the thing for me that really works is that you can tell that there is a love and that there is a passion for film noir and the femme fatale style movies of the 40s and 50s here. You can tell that passion is there, but it just didn't fully come together. And
Yeah.
which
And
is
I think
interesting because this is directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who is a writer in Hollywood, usually. He's directed a couple of movies as well. However, Lawrence Kasdan is also the script writer for Star Wars Episode 5, along with, what's his name? George Lucas. He also wrote Solo, A Star Wars Story, and Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
Wow.
So he's gone on to do better things, luckily. And he's got a decent... This is his first movie. I did see somewhere in the trivia that George Lucas actually helped him get the studio to greenlight it, which was kind of nice.
Interesting. Okay.
But he's had several other movies that he's done. His biggest ones would probably be, or at least the more well-known, be like Wyatt Earp, Silverado, and then Dreamcatcher, which was a Stephen King adaptation.
I think that he had a hand in the Revenge of the Sith scene with Padme and Anakin rolling in the fields and how sensual that was.
He did not, actually.
But I like uncredited.
Oh man, that's so funny. Yeah, I mean, like, it's a start for a first film. It could have been way worse. I mean, this film isn't like awful by any means. It's just
no. I think it's regarded pretty highly from what I saw.
It actually is. It has a Metacritic score of 77, which feels pretty high. The IMDb score is a 7.4, so that's all the fans that have.
You don't like it, but the Rotten Tomatoes is a 98. That means almost 100% of people like this movie.
Which, like, I don't. We've talked about this before. I hate the Rotten Tomatoes system. I think it's stupid. That, like, you could have a movie that gets a 98%, but it's actually a 77. Like, that doesn't.
Well, because it's just a different scale. It's saying that 98% of people like the movie.
It's just misleading, though. Because, you're like, this film got a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, but it's not a 98% movie.
It's misleading if you don't know how to quickly do the interpretation of what the rating means.
But most people don't know that Rotten Tomatoes isn't a normal aggregate. So they just think, this movie got a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. They go see it, they hate it, and they're like, I'm not going to listen to critics anymore. Because they don't know that. So that's where I come from. But, anything else about Body Heat before we end this episode off?
I mean, my final thoughts are, I think this movie had a really good plot and a really good vehicle that it was in, and none of it came together. The wheels fell off, and the acting's pretty bad. The sex stuff is just egregious at times, and it really, to me, takes away from the movie. I get that when it came out, it might have been adding or making a statement, but it definitely takes away from the movie now, to the point where sometimes you're like, why are they showing this? Like, this is unnecessary for them to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I gave this movie a 68.
Okay. For me, I said that while the love for classic noir and femme fatales is there, Body Heat just, for me, fails to be as interesting or as fun as it's trying to be. I would be interested to see potentially a modern remake of this, maybe with two actors that are...
I'd be on a different website.
Yeah, right. Maybe let's be better cast, but I have better chemistry. And maybe... I mean, you could do the whole heat wave thing and make it a statement on climate change. I don't know, but
do a Day After Tomorrow sequel, but it's just Body Heat.
Instead of the Day After Tomorrow, call it the Morning After.
Yeah, Day After Tomorrow, and then the Morning After.
But that being said, as far as the score, I went back and forth on this, but I ended up giving it a 47. It just, again, not awful, but just not really kind of noteworthy either. So, sorry, Mark, when you listen to this, I'm tearing apart one of your favorite movies. But that's going to bring us to an end for this episode. Adrian, if anyone does not follow us online yet or doesn't know where can they do that?
You can find us at the Drive Back Podcast everywhere. That's on Apple Podcasts. If you give us a 5-star review, we'll give you a shout out, like a little billboard kind of thing. We really, really appreciate those. Spotify, the Drive Back Podcast. Find us there as well. Give us a follow. And then on YouTube, where you can actually watch us talk about a movie, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, and then hit the bell. Make sure you get notified. We post on all platforms every Monday, as well as every once in a while, YouTube gets a little something special if we have a fun idea for a video or something like that. So make sure to go follow there.
That's absolutely right. Next week, we hit a milestone. We're doing our 100th episode next week. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now. That's pretty crazy. But as we keep teasing it, we have something real special planned. So make sure you guys tune in, because it's going to be crazy. I don't feel like I can say any more, because that's stupid NDA we signed. But we can talk all we want about it next week.
Yeah, I'm lip sealed over here.
So, but thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you all next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.